Everybody's not after everybody, sir? Everybody's good to go?
Well, welcome everyone. It is our regular council meeting for Tuesday, April 23rd, and a couple minutes before 5 I will call our meeting to order. And to start things off, we've got a special group here before us today. I want to extend a hearty Lacombe welcome to the General's organization and the organizing committee as well. We appreciate you coming here and sharing the cup, and on a personal note, I just want to thank you for a tremendous job that you did and a thoroughly enjoyable not only season, but the Viking Project's Allan Cup itself was a boom for Lacombe and just a real pleasure to attend. So thank you all very, very much.
Thank you.
Let's give a round of applause.
Thank you.
So as the president, you're not only involved with the team, but also with the organizing committee. Would you just like to just mention who you've got along with you today, so we don't...
I'll let Jeff, he talks better than I.
Okay.
His memory's better too.
All right. For the benefit of the people at home, Jeff, if I could just have you turn on the microphone, that's...
Can you read me now?
No, there should be a little red light that comes on when it's active.
Oh, red is on.
You bet.
All right. Well, I'm Jeff McInnes. I'm the GM of the Lacombe Generals, and we're pretty proud to be in front of you today, because it feels like it was just not too long ago we were here in pretty dire straits saying we were going to move the team, and we needed to move it somewhere, and we didn't want it to go to the cemetery. And so you guys said yes. And so it gives me chills to be here, because it's pretty special. And so with us is Wes. Wes, 20 years ago, started this franchise, and I don't think we ever thought we could win anything, and we've won our fourth. And so we credit Wes a lot for a lot of vision, and our committee and our fellow directors. We've got Trey Doobie, who works tirelessly. You have to turn your phone off, because he thinks about it all day and all night. And he's always scheming on the next, what if we did this? What if we did that? And there's always another move to make. Maybe we can clear off your credit card if we did this, and soon we'll be building the monorail. And Allan Ward is the same. He's works with me day and night and tirelessly, and I couldn't even begin to tell you all the things Allan's done for us. And we've got a lot of committee members. Steve Christie said yes when we said, well, we need someone to run this committee. And he looked pretty kind of like deer in the headlights. Okay, what does that mean? Well, a year later, he found out it means a lot. It means there's a lot of coordination, and so between Lionel Barron's support with every turkey toss to pork rib dinner for our players, pork tenderloin, and so there's people here that steer the ship, and it's hard to describe as you run from work, because that's what we do. We just work like we're just working stiffs, but we have this crazy little hobby, and so here we are just joining you today to revel in something that we're a part of. Everybody, every button, every seat in this room had a part in it. And so these men drive it. Boyd Williams cooks our guys' meals every Wednesday, and then they go home with Ziploc bags for lunch the next couple days. And it's enhanced our Wednesday night's attendance tenfold. So all of us have done something that have made us able to be here. And so it's hard to describe how passionate we are about this little group, but it's nice that you guys would have us today, because you guys are a part of it.
I know it might have seemed a little odd that we've waited a couple weeks, but this was the first meeting we've had since the official news, and as I said, it's just an absolute pleasure to have you, and congratulations once again to the councillors. Anything that they'd like to add? Con?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'd also like to congratulate you on a huge accomplishment. I mean, I know most of the history, or a lot of the history of the Cup. Could you maybe just outline that a little bit for the people that are watching or at home?
Well, for 111 years, there's been fools like us chasing this thing from every corner, from Powell River to Clarenville, Newfoundland, and the stories of, you wish this old beat-up sterling silver mug could tell stories of the parties in the Trail, BC. Remember that? There's footage from the 30s, I think, from when Trail won it. And the people along the city streets, and they're all on the rooftops and hanging from lampposts. And so all the history, you can't imagine it. And you can see the towns. And so it's something that was often fought for by, you'll see battalions. You'll see, you know, I could find there was always the 45th Battalion from Ottawa, or the Ottawa Commandos of 1943, and you try and find history on these clubs. And so it's something that's unparalleled. We don't really have something, I can't say it. It's kind of like the Grey Cup, it's kind of like the Stanley Cup, but there's a romance to it because we know what it takes to do it. And it just takes hard work, and it's no one's profession. It's your hobby, it's your obsession. So to try and describe what, you know, the Vernon Canadians did in 1956, well, I kind of think I can, because it takes a whole bunch of people in the community to find these young men and then find them careers and help them get going in life, because they were just maybe an NCAA athlete or a professional hockey player in Sheffield, you know, Ireland or wherever, right? And so you find these young men and you find them careers, and somehow you melt together an organization that feeds them and raises enough money to clothe them with gear, because skates are like $900 and the sticks that they break like kindling are far too much money. But so to see the history of these groups, and we've been in some of these towns. Remember St. George, Quebec? We went to that town and got beat up in 2004. Just got absolutely beat up. We had to learn some lessons along the way. So, but the history of the trophy is magnificent, and Wes loves history. And if he probably turns on the TV, it's the Discovery Channel or the History Channel. So, is there anything you'd like to speak to the history?
It was special to have the fourth one for our organization, but especially for the city of Lacombe to have a championship like this. And it's hard to win. In the 20 years that I've been working with it, it's really, you can really understand why it was only won 4 times prior to us coming along in Alberta, and that was in 46 in Calgary, 48 in Edmonton, 66 in Drumheller, and 99 in Stony Plain. And Stony Plain had multiple shots at trying to win it. They only won it 1 time, so it was really, really hard. We didn't think we could ever win it once, let alone 4 times. So it's special to have it here today, and it's no less special than the first time or second or third, just to have it a 4th time, and in this community with what we got for support right from when we moved here, and everything from the people in this room, the people that were in this room prior to you guys, and then just everything from the very first meeting when we tried to host the Allan Cup in Lacombe. The facility that we were able to show off was just, you could see it in their eyes that day. Steve and I did the meeting, and it was like cheating, because we were showing them this wonderful facility, and it's like, I think we have a good shot of getting this just because it has everything you need. We've been all over Canada and seen what was to offer, and Lacombe had the best that there was, with everything that was in that building, between the curling rink, the back rink, all them new rooms that were put on that place, and the wider hallways. It was fantastic, and Jeff, credit to him and the help that he got from some of the other people from within the city and the other people in the committee and so on to put an excellent bid together. But yeah, it was really an effort from everybody, and yeah, just we're proud. We're very proud today to have it. So thank you.
Well, you should be. All you gentlemen were busy working. I had the pleasure of taking in some of the games and speaking with a lot of fans were there, both locally and from across the country. And there was an awful lot of compliments. Many individuals who had been to several Allan Cups across the country suggested this was by far the best that they had ever seen, which kudos to the organizing committee. Thank you, Steve, for all the work that you did. And we've also got Allan Benefield here, who put in an awful lot of work, he and his staff. So once again, a real team effort, and the one component that we didn't mention so far was the participation of many local businesses, certainly the naming sponsors, Viking Projects, and many others who put forth their energies and resources as well. So thank you once again. I think we'd like to have an opportunity to maybe take a picture out in front of the City Hall press, unless there's somebody else in the committee or whatever that would like to say
Yeah.
anything, you're certainly welcome to.
Boyd that made a good point today when we talked. We got to get that banner to you guys. We made some nice banners, and you guys were sponsors of the event yourselves. And so the administration said, yeah, we'll be a part of it. And so Boyd Williams has these banners that we had made. I don't know where you can put them. I don't know how you'll do with them. I'm glad to burden you with some of our leftovers, because we've got a lot of them. But they're keepsakes, and I think the romance grows over the years because you look back, and I think we're proud of the event we held. And I think that if there's a spot in the shop, I don't know what you'll do with it, but if there's a spot that you can keep it. I was never more proud than to drive down and see the flags on Main Street, on the lamp posts. And I love that. And I would, usually I come through the five-way because I like to tease myself that I'm going through a five-way stop. But I was never more proud than to drive down and see those flags, because I'll remember that the rest of my time. And I hope that as we talk about the rockets all the time, I hope that when we're no longer, that they'll talk about us like that, because it's something to be proud of. So I hope you guys will take that and be proud of those.
Well, you're certainly not burdening me with it, but I have people here that can certainly find an appropriate spot to display it proudly.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's go and get a picture then.
Okay.
Sound good?
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
It looks different than one that you received at lunch. It seems to have
There's a lot of stuff.
I like it. Great work.
I was trying to get them for
I think we should do it.
So since,
See, it's neat.
Especially me, tomorrow being so terrible. Not till 10, so that's not too bad.
so thanks everybody, certainly honored to have members of the Lacombe Generals here. That was great. I think everybody at home can look forward to some photos on social media and the web too, so that's wonderful. Before we move along, we've got one other acknowledgement here. Our CEO was recently recognized by AUMA, which is the Canadian Association of Municipal Administrators, for his 10 years of service, long service award in a management capacity. So on behalf of council, Matt, I want to congratulate you on this noteworthy milestone in your career, and we look forward to many, many more years. I see that you're wearing the silver pin that signifies that, so congratulations. All right. So we do have an agenda before you. There'll be some changes in order to accommodate our guests here today. Is there anything else we need to consider adding on the agenda? Councillor Connick?
I do want to add an in-camera land item.
Very good. Anything else? Motion? Councillor Hibbs?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Sorry, a little slow on the ball there. I will move that we adopt the agenda as amended, I guess that would be.
Very good. Seeing others, all those in favor? Carried, thank you. So we'll just proceed down to new business under financial services and ask our senior manager, DeBresser, to come up here and take us through the 2018 audited financial statements. We just had a little notation difference here, my apologies. In fact, the audit statements, we're going to have the presentation from our BDO representatives here, Allan, the senior partner, and auditor Ryan Wachter, so come on up and join us, please.
Number one means number one. Means first.
Oh, crazy. Welcome, gentlemen. You've been here many times before, so as long as the red light's on, everyone at home can hear you as well, so the floor is yours.
Absolutely, and it's a tough act to follow, by the way. So we'll be doing pictures with the statements out front. But what we're going to do today, typical for the end of the year, we're going to go through the statements. What I'm going to do is just go through the auditing report itself, and then Ryan's going to jump into the statement itself at a high level and just kind of go through some variances, things like that. But at any point in time, if you guys have questions, just jump in and we'll go from there. So I'm just going to turn you guys to, I don't have a page number, the audited statements, or audited report right there. So there's 2 pages to the report this year. So to scroll back. So the auditor's report has changed a little bit, well, quite a bit over last year. The standards haven't changed anything, haven't changed this year. It's just the format of the report itself. They've expanded it to explain a little bit more of the responsibilities of everybody. And one of the big ones is they've actually put the opinion paragraph right at the top. And that's the biggest part of the report itself. And as in other years, it's a clean opinion. It's within the standards. So the city's done a great job with the statement this year as well. The rest of the report goes on, and it's broken out to a few areas. The basis of opinion talks about, we're using the audit standards to look at the statements and evaluate those. It talks about the responsibility of management and those charged with governance. And overall, basically, these statements are the responsibility of the city. And then it finally goes through the auditor's responsibility of how we proceed through our audit and how we do our work on the statements itself. Okay. So is there any questions on the audit report? Just to sum it up, it's a clean opinion and it's as in every year. So any questions on the report itself before we jump into the statements?
So just to be clear then, as far as the checks and balances and the information you received here at the city, everything's good, that's all part of
Absolutely.
the clean opinion?
Clean opinion, yeah, it's within the standards set down by the Civil Act and the standards for the accounting. So everything sort of checks and balances are in place.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, we're going to jump into the financial statements here and look at some numbers.
All right, so I'm going to run you through just a couple of the high-level things on the statements. The statements themselves are 30 pages. I'm going to talk about just kind of some of the key items that came up during audit. So I'm going to start here with the consolidated statement of financial position. This is as if we kind of took a picture or a snapshot of time as at December 31st. What did the city have for assets and liabilities? So a little backwards looking, but it'll give us a good idea. So the first big thing to notice is your cash and your short-term investments. The city in the prior year had about $10 million in cash, up to $21 million this year, with 18 of that being in some short-term investments. Those short-term investments are GICs, earning the interest about 2.5% to 3%. So fairly liquid, just getting a better rate than sitting in a checking account, but GICs are technically investments, which is why they're shown that way. So you're up about $11 million. A large component of that relates to some long-term debt financing that was taken in the year. If you look down at almost the very last liability, your long-term debt has gone from 16 million to 21.5 million. I'll touch on this a bit more as I go through the statements, but you're up in debt to over $5 million. Some of that's still actually kind of sitting in the bank there. It hasn't quite been spent yet. Moving down from your assets, really your taxes receivable and your accounts receivable there, they're up from last year. Like I said, this is a snapshot rate at December 31st, so just a little bit of a timing thing. Some more money just actually came in after year end, and the prior year was just a little quicker to come in. Your inventory held for resale, that's mostly made up of the land for resale. And there just wasn't any sales last year. That's why you haven't seen any movement in that account this year. Overall, the city has just over $31 million of financial assets. So financial assets are cash or things that can be easily turned or will be turned into cash. So for liabilities, the big one, like I said, is that long-term debt. This city's got $21 million of long-term debt versus 16 last year. The other big one there is that deferred revenue. Deferred revenue is money that the city has received in the form of either grants or deposits that they're going to use on future projects. The biggest one is those are capital grants. You've got the money for it. You just haven't done the capital project itself yet. So you can see that's up about $3 million. Again, that contributes why there's that kind of jump in cash right at the end of the year. It's just the timing of those projects. Were done in 18, they'll be done in the future year, and you'll see that kind of come down. Overall, it leaves the city in a little bit of a net debt position of just under $4 million. Large component of that is the long-term debt in the municipal financial statements. This gets shown as one at $21 million. The $21 million isn't due next year kind of thing. So that's what's kind of leading just to that net debt figures. You have a lot of liquid kind of current assets, but that debt you will actually pay it over a longer period. The non-financial assets, the only big one there is your tangible capital assets. So these are your engineered structures, your roadways, any vehicles or equipment that the town or the city owns. This is their book value at about $165 million. So the amount paid less, we've slowly written them down over time. So I'll flip you one more page here to the statement of operations. So this is, do you have any questions on that first before I go? So I jumped a little quick. The other one I think will help tie in some of that information a bit. So the statement of operations here, this is your January 1st to December 31st, what kind of revenue and expenses came in and went out. When we did the audit, we kind of looked at it, a lot on the comparison of budget. The budget was what your council had kind of passed and expected for the year. So the budgeted revenue is, as a total, was 52 million. Actual was 36. Seems like a big decrease, but the decrease is all in that government transfers there. The budget was 20 million and the actual was 4. So the reason being is there was $17 million budgeted for capital revenue and capital work to be done. That just wasn't done in the year. So that revenue and the grants received for capital projects, if the project isn't done, the revenue doesn't come in. So the city just didn't quite get to all the projects that were initially planned, therefore didn't recognize all the revenue related to those types of projects. The other big one that kind of made a change in your revenues there is the city did receive some development levies. They're unbudgeted for. Your levies were about 2.4 million in the year. Overall though, from an expenses side, the budgeted was 34.7 million and the actual was 34.5. So there wasn't anything, overly significant there that we noted. What that does is it leaves the city with a $2.2 million of revenue over expenses. What does that mean? I'm going to actually flip you way into the statements all the way to page 24 and note 17. So I think this note kind of helps hopefully explain a bit more exactly what went on with the city. So the revenue over expenses, there was all your actual revenue that came in during the year and was recognized. And the expenses also include amortization, which is us kind of slowly writing those assets down. A little bit of a non-cash item there. So what this note does is it kind of brings it down into more of a cash basis. How did we do? When the budget's done, things like capital assets, long-term debt payments, those are included as cash outflows and included in the budget. But those aren't actual expenses necessarily for accounting standards because you're actually buying a capital asset. So the budget was 17.7 million was hopefully the revenue over expenses in the year. It actually came in at 2.2 million. There's a couple non-cash items included in there. City received a contributed asset in the year. The big one being $6 million of amortization. So we kind of add that back in to kind of get to about $8 million worth of cash from actual activities on a budget of 23. There's some cash outlays though that aren't revenue or expenses. The big one being the capital acquisition. So the budgeted was 22 million. Actual that went out was $4 million in the year. So just a little bit of a timing thing on when some of the projects got done. But that's kind of why you also have that corresponding decrease in the revenue over expenses. It's kind of tied with that capital work there. The last kind of adjustment is there's money that gets transferred to and from your reserves. It's not included in that statement of operations as they're just not an expenditure under the accounting standards. So the council approved budget balance was zero. If you scroll down just a little bit, just to prove to you that 17 million actually does end up being zero, and that was the approved budget. The actual approved balance, if we kind of try to compare apples to apples, was 6.8 million. So that includes $318,000 from an operating surplus and a $6.5 million capital surplus. The capital surplus ties a bit more into timing. You got some of those long-term debt funds in, but haven't paid out for some of the capital. Does that kind of make sense? Hopefully it ties it in a bit better. Any questions on that one before I move on? Matt?
So just to be clear, in this instance, it's not that we started some projects and then didn't get them done by Christmas or whatever. It's the big thing is the west area project. It was budgeted for last year. It was not started. It is started now. That's what a $15 million project. 16 or so, 17, sorry, 17, yeah, 16. So that is the big difference that you're seeing here, just to make sure that everybody is very clear on that.
So, and yet, that's not unusual when we see across other municipalities as well. When you've got bigger projects like that, it's just a timing thing as far as the budget to actually goes. The real purpose of this note is to show, A, you guys have a balanced budget to start with. And we're trying to reconcile it to what the accounting standards show, so you guys can sort of see that differences and what those adjustments are that we make for the year-end financial statements for the standard purposes, okay?
All right, I'm gonna flip you back to page 5 and talk about one last statement, and I'll talk about one last note, and maybe we'll have some questions. So, page 5 is the statement of cash flows. Scroll up there. So, we get lots of questions always, where did the cash go? So in the year, there was the top part, the operating transaction. This is money that actually came in kind of from activities. The city received $9 million at the end of the year. You end up spending $4 million on capital transactions. On a net basis, you bought $4 million, you sold some stuff for about $100,000. Your investing transactions, you bought that $18 million in short-term investments. And then another big one being that financing transactions where you've taken the 6.8 in debt, paid back 1.4. So that's why you have a little bit of another $5 million sitting there. So it does show us a cash decrease of $10 million.
Scroll up a little bit there.
Oh, there we go. Thank you. So your net change in cash was down to 10 million, but like I said, 18 million is sitting over in GICs. The only other item I want to note in the statements is on page 17, note 10.
Brian, just before you move on, there's
Sure.
this page is deposit liabilities. What does that refer to? 330,000 or less?
So those, if you scroll up just a little bit there, Russ. So that top part there is your change in some of the items that come from the balance sheet. So your deposit liabilities can include things like utility deposits, water meter deposits, any deposits on developments or kind of any deposit that you receive.
That area is actually changes in balances. Like what it's doing is it's converting everything to a cash. So it goes from last year to this year as far as the change in the balance goes. So money comes in, like if receivables, for example, if they come in, then your cash is going up in the current year. So it's not a balance at the end of the year, it's a change in balance from one year to the next, just so you know.
And so how is it that it could be a negative amount in 2017 if it's deposits?
So what happens is you actually have to give back more deposits than you received that year. And then this year you've gotten more this year, you have to kind of pay back. And it's all just the timing of when people make those deposits and when they come in.
So the large swings would probably be due to development deposits specifically, securities, that sort of thing, is how you'd see those big numbers. So,
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Any questions on this one before I flip it? All right, we'll flip to page 17 to note 10. We just wanted to bring this one to council's attention. This is your reserve balance and surplus at the end of the year, so this is how it's kind of broken down. If you scroll down just a little bit more, a restricted surplus, that's our reserves. So the city has set aside $6.1 million of reserves at the end of the year. So we just wanted to point out that's kind of where it all went, and this is kind of a layout of what types of reserves the city has. Those are kind of the items we wanted to talk about on the statements. I'd love to hear if anybody has any questions on them. We'd be happy to answer those. Thank you.
Brian, what page is the debt limits and debt service limits on?
Page 23. Note 16.
So right here, the note shows that the total debt that the city would be allowed to take under the Municipal Government Act is $52 million. The city's currently at $21 million, so lots of debt room available. The debt servicing component is also reviewed, and the city could service up to, I guess, $8.7 million in principal and interest is what MGA says you're going to service next year, about just over $2 million.
And I certainly don't look out the figures there. I just wanted to be clear, those figures are for the MGA or the 75% self-imposed limits.
So those ones are per the MGA, and they're actually based at 1.5 times your revenue, is how we come up with the total debt limit. And the servicing was 0.25, essentially saying 25% of your revenue to go towards servicing, but those are the MGA numbers.
Given that we have a policy on the books here at the city that I believe states that we are self-imposed at 75%, would it be appropriate to have a note as such on those statements? It's a fairly substantial difference in dollar amounts. So.
Absolutely. The idea behind this note is just, it's a financial indicator note, essentially. So the limits are there, they're not necessarily imposed limits, they're calculated limits. And what it's saying is if you're, encroaching on those limits, you'd have to, look at those financial indicators and see if it makes sense to be at those limits, essentially. So definitely, as far as what you're talking about, is those self-imposed limits can be in there. We typically don't put them in there because it's just, this again, it's a financial indicator per the MGA is essentially what that is.
No, and I was just curious why it wasn't, if that was just not standard practice, or, it makes a substantial difference, 25% less on.
Yeah, this is, like I said, it's a financial indicator the MGA has, and it's a standard one, so you can compare across other municipalities and cities.
Fair enough, thank you.
Any other questions? I did touch on all the notes. If there's any questions on the other ones, we're happy to answer those as well.
Councilor Hoekstra.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I hate to make it about me, but on page 22, just curious why there is an amount that's missed beside my name. I'm Councilor Hoekstra and I don't have any benefits and allowances, so just curious about that.
Fortunately, that just got missed. We'll make sure that gets updated for the finals.
You're not telling us just because she was more efficient than the rest of us. Good eye, though. I don't believe that there's any other questions. We appreciate you gentlemen taking time out of your day to put in a little overtime and come and see us. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, we want to thank Matt and Justin, obviously, for all the work they did as well for the year and made it easier on us.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
So in consideration of those presenters, we did adjust our normal course of business. So we've got some minutes from April 8th. Has everybody had an opportunity to review those? Any concerns or revisions? Councilor Hoekstra?
I move that we accept the minutes as presented.
Thank you very much. All those in favor? Unanimous, thank you. And council mailbox. Councilor Conick?
I would so move we accept council mailbox's information.
Thank you. Was there any items of concern or anything that required clarification in those documents, anyone? Councilor Hoekstra.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I guess I was concerned, or wondering how we respond to the citizen regarding the chipping of their elderly dog. Like, their letter is here. Will there be a formal response to that citizen as a query, or?
I think we'll let Chief Gowdy answer that one.
Yes, we'll always provide a response in this instance because it was directed to the mayor and to council. Whenever that happens, we do include it on the mailbox. That we wait to respond, just in case there is some discussion that we can glean anything from at council. So if there's anything specific that you would want included, certainly we can do that. Otherwise, it would be a fairly standard response. In this instance, basically saying we appreciate that concern. However, the bylaw is made to apply to the entire city, and so we don't have specific exemptions for age.
Anyone else? Refer back to Councilor Connick made a motion to accept as presented. All those in favor? Unanimous, thank you. Very good. Senior Manager DeBress, you want to come up and join us? We'll move down into section 9 under new business, the financial services, item 2018 audited financial statements. Even the presentation is now completed.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy and Council. Before you have the audited financial statements, and we'll go from the top again, right through them, just tricking. So I'll touch on some points that the auditors didn't pick up on, but didn't address, is probably a better word. Definitely the West Area Servicing Project, as Matt alluded to, was the big $17 million deficit in the government transfers. So that will be definitely reflected in the 2019 financials. And one thing at the note at the end that reconciles the balanced budget is the capital deficit underneath the operating surplus. That's where you see the swings in the capital projects as well. So just notice on that. Investments did well. Overall, just under $400,000 in investment interest revenue. That's an additional $108,000 over the budget amount, and based on the investment policy and the government's grants that we've got sitting in our bank account, we do have to allocate interest back to those funds. So we had to actually allocate $154,000 of that interest back to MSI Capital and the federal gas tax funds as well, as per the grant agreements. In saying that, that's still our money to spend, but they just restrict us to what we can spend it on. So going forward, we have that money. Long-term debt was for the area, the arena Eastside expansion. We borrowed for the Main Street project, as well as the southeast water trunk extension over in Mackenzie Park. So that was the debt coming onto the books. Sales and user fees, that budget line was under by $904,000. Majority of that is our Len Thompson lots that we didn't sell. We budget selling one lot at $265,000, so that was the majority of the deficit there. But sales and user fees are pretty, it's one of the bigger revenue lines in the city there. Development levies were mentioned at $2.4 million. We do not budget for them. Contributed assets, or the Lacombe Athletic Park basketball courts, added to the city's books as a capital asset.
Before you get too far along those pages,
Sure.
could you just address under financial assets there on the first page? Accounts receivable increased $1.3 million. What is it that accounts for that?
Well, that could be a vast variety of things like our utility billing, anything that's receivable, basically anything that we bill for and we haven't collected, that will cause an increase in there. I'm just trying to think of some other, definitely all our utility accounts. Anything at the rec's kind of minor, but we do invoice, hockey clubs, sporting facilities. We do invoice on that. We generally have a pretty good collection rate on the receivables. And you do get noted of uncollectible receivables on the flip side of that accounts in December. Anything that we can't collect from prior years, we bring to council and we ask for approval to write that off there. So without having the in-depth details of the receivables there, I can't really answer down to the detail there.
Now, it would be a timing issue with those accounts receivable. Could it include things like the county, if we had billed them for their portion of a capital project or a facilities operation and we're waiting for the money?
Correct.
Show up there?
Yeah, so one good example is the West Area Servicing. Whatever we've expended in that, we are billing on a monthly basis for that project. So it could be that all the December invoices came in and the offset based on the agreement we billed the county. So that could be a majority of that, but we do bill on a monthly basis. So.
Thank you, I appreciate that. The other one up above it there, the increased cash holdings along with the city's guaranteed investment certificate portfolio by $11 million. So I think that could be misunderstood by members of the public. So just what is it that makes up that sum, the $11 million?
Sorry, the 21 million total cash and investments?
Correct. Yes, that or the increase of the 11 million.
Okay.
Or the same. Okay.
So, a couple of things. Definitely the debt borrowing. We expended a lot of cash in the previous year. We finished off the project and then we borrowed the debt portion, and that it would account for about that $5.3 million. Grants receivable. You'll see the deferred revenue. The MSI capital is based on grant applications, and by the time we get the funds in, that will go into the cash and hit the deferred revenue, if that makes sense. So you can see that line increased as well from $4 million to 7.3. So there's a good $3 million worth of grant revenue that we've got in, but we haven't expended it yet. And that ties into the interest allocation that we made good interest off those funds, so we have to revert some of that interest back to those funds as well. So.
And then the remainder is just an amalgamation of all the reserve accounts?
Correct.
Thank you.
Schedule of property taxes. So page 18, that kind of shows our property taxes coming in and all the requisitions that we do pay out throughout the year. It was within $64,000, which is 0.4%. So that's the calculation on the property tax rate bylaw. It's pretty accurate that we receive the income that we should receive. As of December 31st, the city has used 41% of the statutory debt limit. I just quickly calculated this 75% self-imposed. You'll be about 55% at the moment. Mind you, we still got the debt for the West Area Servicing coming on the books, maybe later this year. So that will definitely increase your holding. But we did really see a good increase in our top level debt limit, up to $52 million. And that's based on our revenue, especially it's tied to municipal revenue, and you've got to back out the capital grant. So the auditors didn't really go into the detail of the calculation, but pretty much it's our municipal revenue minus the capital transfers. So that, it's showing $52 million, which is a really good increase over last year, and that was helped by the increase in wastewater rates as well. User fees are contributed to that increase as well. So I predict, based on the statutory debt limit, by the end of next year, you'll be at around that 63%, maybe 65%. which is substantially better position than the last 10-year capital plan that we presented. It was in the 70s, basically.
So once again, that's 63% of...
The statutory.
Thank you.
Yeah. Financial implications, as the auditors did mention, the surplus of around $318,000 will be addressed in a separate memo tonight. And I'll open up for any other questions, but our recommendation from administration would be to approve the 2018 financial statements as amended, I assume, with Councillor Hoekstra's benefits in there.
Councillor Jacobson.
Sir, just a couple of quick questions, and I apologize because I probably should know this, but off the top of your head, Manager Debressa, do you have an idea how much debt is coming off the books in the next year or two? Because as I recall, there was a substantial amount being retired.
From the top of my head, I think at the end of 2019 we had some utility debt in the I think it was a lift station that we borrowed for, but that's utility supported, so that's not really tax supported. In 2020, I think we had around $150,000 to $160,000 worth of debt servicing come off. I'm not sure what the corresponding amount of debt, but it's around that 150 of debt servicing.
Okay. And then my second question, this is more of a, I suppose, a philosophical question than anything, and if it's unfair, I apologize, I mean, put you on the spot, but you've been doing these budgets with this council for 2 years now. And is your assessment that our stated policy of keeping tax increases aligned with CPI, do you believe that that's sustainable moving forward based on your handle of the reins so far?
Good question. I'm not sure how to address that because the particular date that we set CPI, well, council chose to set CPI, historically can be quite different, and we were fortunate last year to do what we did with the budget at 2.8%. This year, in a couple of months, we'll know what that will be, end of July, or maybe into August. Sustainable? Yeah, I assume so, but once again, it's your budget. We will work within the means of what council would like to see. That is a policy that will present a budget that indicates CPI. What you do with the budget over and above that is your decision, but it is administration's kind of direction that we will bring you a CPI budget, whether it's 1%, whether it's 5%. I'm not sure. Hopefully that answers your question.
I think you might have a career in politics when you're done.
Gotta become a citizen.
Chief Gotti, did you have something to add to that?
I was just financially, it's sustainable because if that's your policy, then that's what the rate will be. It's whether your service level is sustainable to match that, but absolutely we can continue meeting the CPI with no problem.
All right, then, if you don't mind me following up, then to restate my question, then maybe CAO Gowdy, do you believe our service level is sustainable with to this CPI increase in taxation?
Yes, I think that if we are careful about the service level and don't see it creeping up in areas, that we will be able to continue to meet that same goal. That is certainly where we're driven, is to say, to deliver on the CPI commitment and keep services the same. But of course, the service level is set by council, and so if there is a desire for an increased service level somewhere, we can make that happen too. The two may come to a head at some point. Looking at the last year, we were really fortunate with the way our investments performed, and so far this year has been good as well for that.
Anyone else? Councillor Ross?
I will so move. And now I lost my page. I was the council approved it to the 2018 audited financial statements as presented. As amended, my apologies.
No problem, we understand it to be as amended. Any additional comment? question then, all those in favor? Unanimous? Thank you. We'll just have you flip over your pages on your agenda and have a look at the allocation of surplus for 2018. Manager Director, do you want to take us through that item?
Actually, although it was originally intended for Manager DeResser, he and I discussed it, and I think I'm going to take the surplus allocation this evening.
Very well.
However, I will keep you there in case there's questions. Thank you. So tonight we have before you a recommendation for the allocation of your operating surplus from 2018. As I indicated, one of the big factors was our investments performing better than expected. The other big factor here that contributed to this surplus is that there had been an expectation of debt servicing for the West Area project that did not occur in 2018. So that showed up both in your operating statements as well as here at the end of the day for your surplus. So basically we had collected money expecting to make debt payments associated with that project. We didn't get the project started until we're going to start this year, and so there is some additional funds there. So tonight we have three recommended motions, the first being two being related to the allocation of the surplus, and one being related to the covering of a deficit that was incurred in the Lacombe Police Service operating unit. So overall, the city's 2018 year-end resulted in an overall operating surplus of $319,000. This is due to a number of factors, and I've listed them there in your executive summary. It's probably the best spot. About $110,000 from the increased investment revenue, about $242,000 associated with the lower than expected debenture payments, general variations in the departments where projects were brought in under budget, that sort of thing, of $112,000, and then a net increase in cost of $144,000 across the organization due to wages and benefits. So the reason that we have also recommended a withdrawal of $142,963 from the Lacombe Police Service operating reserve is that this operating reserve was intended to cover both unexpected expenditures such as the replacement of a vehicle or the covering of a deficit. The policy that was passed by council does include in it a statement that the commission is able to make expenditures out of that reserve. There is an enabling sort of legislation there that says they can make expenditures out of the reserve up to $50,000 with their own approval, and then if there is the need to cover an operating deficit, it's there as well. Council does not require a similar enabling legislation because it is your money held in your account. So there is no need. In this instance, Lacombe Police Service, because of the timing, they have not been advised of the recommendation before you this evening, although they are aware of it, to withdraw the $142,000. So overall, there was a deficit in the Lacombe Police Service of $238,627. This is due to a combination of factors. I would say the largest of which is unforeseen consequences due to the latest collective bargaining agreement in the way that staff days are paid out and accounted for. There was also an error in the budgeting for the number of FTEs, both in sort of the review and the entering of the data, resulted in an oversight. And then there was a change in regulations regarding bail hearings. This has led to an increase in guarding costs for the service. They are trending high this year as well, so this is something that we expect to occur in 2019 as well. And it's something that we would certainly be looking to correct going into the 2020 budget year. Beyond that, that does leave $50,000 into the police operating reserve. That covers the unforeseen expenditure side of the intent of that reserve, which does allow for expenditures by the police commissioner, authorization of expenditures from that reserve up to $50,000. So that still leaves them in a position to be able to cover those unexpected expenditures that may come up. but it does help cover the deficit incurred overall. We are recommending beyond that a allocation to the general operating reserve of approximately $95,000. Debt reduction, so a reduction in the amount of debt borrowing that would occur related to the 76th Street intersection improvement project this year, a reduction of approximately $367,000, resulting in a balanced allocation. I will open it to questions or direction from there.
Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So in regards to the Police Commission, what is their direction to not put themselves in this position in the future? I respect when Chief Bloomhagen assumed the position as chief that he has a lot of challenges and desire to increase with the capability of the building of the number of members, but part of budget planning should be realizing some of these expenses, and I guess some of this should have been seen. Like, to me, $238,000 is basically a 1.5%. This is the act on to next year that we have to realize this in budget deliberations for 2020. So moving forward, I guess my question to CO Gowdy is, what directions will they be doing or changes so that we don't face this annually or and so forth?
I would say that the unfortunate part about this deficit is it's not like an error that is easily corrected from a financial standpoint. It's not like, oh, I won't spend money frivolously. It wasn't being frivolously spent. It was spent on police services that were delivered in the community, that delivered value and have contributed to a really safe community. So I don't think there's like an easy solution. I'm sure that the Police Commission is asking those same questions, and we'll be working through how to mitigate that. But when I look at it and when I look at the trends so far in 2019, I think you're correct that we need to prepare mentally for a good part of that CPI budget going towards delivering the level of the service level that has been adopted by the police. And again, unfortunately, I think it's a budgeting error. It's not a service delivery error, if that makes sense. It's not like, oh, we put too many police on the streets. It's, oh, we didn't realize that with the stat days being, and that it is a very complex thing that the way the stat days are paid out and then accounted for, it does end up, there's a bigger impact than anyone suspected. And it's tough for us to comment. We weren't involved in the negotiation of the collective agreement, so I don't know whether that was well known or not foreseen and didn't get approved, but regardless. Unfortunately, we are at a spot where I do expect there to be an overage in the department again.
So that made me add further is I respect the collective agreement and so forth of the members, but with our community being at a population of 13,500, I think it's been the direction to be with the provincial, national number of members per capita average. But yet we're at a rated at a 77 index out of 300, which is significantly higher than our communities within Alberta. Do we need to be at the number of members that we do to still provide the adequate service? You know, does that? We're now at what, 21, and we've had the new building allowed us to get up to that average per capita, provincial national average per capita, but does it justify? Like, no, should we be looking at crime severity index and crime statistic numbers to justify the number of members that we have? I think most citizens want a safe community. That's been said by a lot. Fire, police, water, sewer, a lot of it's in the top 5. But when you look at Black Falls, there is Milton Road 821 to 792 to 42, including Gassing Alley with 21 members. Although but you don't get the same level of service. So that's, it'd be interesting to get some feedback of what people do want, just like you say.
Councillor Jacobson?
So this is quite interesting in some ways, because this is a scenario that when I was on the police commission I had brought up, could very well occur down the road when the commission went through a process of really both formalizing its relationship with the city and going down its own path. And to Councillor Ross's point, actually it's interesting to discuss these things, but it is the purview of the commission to decide how many police officers and all that stuff it wants, but it's council's decision to decide how much money it's going to give it. So what's interesting is like they're in a structural deficit now, as the CEO has said. Like they're not even in a I can't fix it kind of thing. Like they're in a structural deficit, which they can genuinely probably only fix by either us giving them more money or them adjusting their members. And before we just simply write a blank check down the road, I do believe it would be a very good, I don't know what you call it, a professionalizing process, learning process, whatever you want to say, to put some accountability back on the commission to say, this was your decision, this was the money that was allotted to you, you tell us what's going to happen, right? Because if all it's going to be is they do what they're going to do, and regardless of what happens, regardless of the intention of the decision, the city just covers the check regardless, then, it's really not functioning the way it's supposed to, I think. So, like I said, I'm not even sure what I think of this moving forward, but I do think this is an opportunity to really put it back on them to say, okay, all right, yes, you are independent, you're your own body, but you made this mistake, so what's going to happen here? We don't want to see just simply give us more money. We want to hear something about this, right? So that's all I want to comment on that for now.
Thank you. Chief Gowdy?
So I guess in defense of the police commission, I don't think that they receive direction from council on how much they have to spend and then say, whatever. We want 24 officers, which I think is everything we want. I think that this occurred, one of the issues was that they had added a administrative position and sent that over to us to include in the budget, and so we went to put that in the budget, forgot to put it in, sent it back and said, okay, this, you've got 7 members or 7 admin staff. We actually wanted 8, so this is good, and they looked at it, oh yeah, that's fine. And so we both kind of said, it's little oversights like that. It's not that the commission said, add another admin staff, the city doesn't need to worry about it. And so that's where I think a structural deficit is a good term for it. I don't think that it's that they've changed their service level without consulting with council. I don't think they've came and said, actually council doesn't know, but they want more officers than they've asked for. It really was a couple of compounding oversights, I would say.
So, from my perspective, it's one thing to be out this amount of money in a year, and I'm not interested in assigning blame to the who's. The fact is that it's over, it was on December 31st. However, if you're suggesting that we're on the same path for the year coming up, and there is no pool of reserve funds to go in, this is a substantial hole in the boat. We're a third of the way through the year. If we're on track for this, it's $80,000 already, a third of it. I don't want to be having this conversation again in a year and say, oh, we're out another $240,000. This is not acceptable, this is not sustainable. So we need to be loud and clear with the message that, well, in fact, I think that the community overall is very happy with the police service level. There may have to be some adjustment to it because they have to operate within the financial boundaries that we give them. This is not acceptable long term. Councillor Hoekstra?
Thanks, Mark Creasy. So I was curious, I'm more following up on your comments, Mayor, that this is our reality, but I'm concerned about what's happening going forward too. First of all, a little bit on the past. we will absorb that $100,000 deficit. Where from? Like, we still have a surplus, but we're going to absorb whatever's left here, that 95, right? Where does that come from? I'm curious how we're absorbing it, but next year, potentially, we got to absorb 240, because then we won't have the reserve the reserve will be gone. And how do we do that?
So just to be clear here, the net surplus of 318 includes the 240 already paid for out of it. So there's not additional to find. I guess to add to the sort of your concern there, you know, I do hear this talk of the provincial averages, the provincial averages that they try to meet, and I do think that that's a bit of a blunt measurement that doesn't take into account things like calls for service and geographic factors. I had Justin pull some numbers for me before the meeting to look at the historical trends. There has been significant, in 2014, the police budget, the net cost was about 1.9 million to the city. In 2018, it was 3.4 million. And so over the last 4 years, the average increase in net cost to the city, it's ranged from a minimum of 8% year over year up to 30% year over year for an average of 15% year over year. So in terms of sustainability, you know, you asked about sustainability earlier. Is it sustainable to meet our current service level? I think it is. I do think the police were behind and have been brought to a spot where they are effectively delivering safety services in the community. I was going to say, I don't know. It is not sustainable to be increasing 15% year over year. It's just not. It's just not doable.
Councillor Jacobson?
Yeah, so to follow up on my previous statement and the CEO's comments, I guess, to be clear, I wasn't suggesting that there was anything untoward being deviously done by the commission. But it also, the mayor brought up another question I had. Maybe this question is for Councillor Connick, because he's there sitting in the meetings. So if this happened in this is the 2018 budget that's happening in 2019, was it just like in December that this overage was realized, or was this trending the whole year? And you know, and this was just yeah, I don't know, like, was somebody hoping it was going to go away at the end? And I'm just curious why, if that was the case, if it was known sort of all year, and we're over this much now, I mean, was our presentation in October not taking that into account? Was that just being sort of, yeah, again, was that just hoping it was going to go away? Like I said, I know you're there, so what is their discussion about this?
Thank you. Just a follow-up question. Before I get to your question, Manager DeBresser, as far as the 238 goes, the problem with the 1 FTE, that was identified prior to the 2019 budget, was it not? Or was it? My understanding was that was identified. So the 2019 budget, as far as the FTE is concerned, is correct, is it not?
I'd have to double check. I didn't, my payroll person does the budgeting for the police. So I would have to double check, but in the discussions that how it did get missed, it was a time frame that they added a staff member later in the year. We don't need to go into that, but I definitely haven't had any concerns that it's not included in the 2019 budget.
It is or isn't included in the
It is.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for
But
that.
I will give you the disclaimer that I'll have to double check.
Okay. As far as whether or not it was trending, see, to begin with, we were, 2 meetings ago, this was brought to the attention of the police commission that we were in a deficit position. We were as taken aback as you all were. As far as trending throughout the year, we were on track. And I think it came about through the audit that this was, correct me if I'm wrong, this was identified. So we didn't, as the police commission, as far as we're concerned, we get the financial statements every month, as you're aware, Councillor Jacobson, and we were trending on track. It wasn't until the auditors came in that this issue was identified, if I'm not mistaken. For me, when we were looking at the financial statements throughout the year, we were on track. We were, there's variances throughout, but we were on track for the most part. So a couple comments, so that's my comment to that. As far as going forward in 2019, we are aware that, of course, that we have identified, that's why we've tried to address this already in that, as you're aware, Constable Hewitt left us in January. The plan was to replace him in April. That's not happening anymore. We've pushed that back, that recruitment back in order to try and get a handle on this. My understanding is, so it's not going to be a 20, let's be clear, it shouldn't be a $240,000 deficit next year, by any means, especially if we've accrued or accounted for the FTE, which I believe we have. So we are behind, but not to the extent that we've seen here. And I think it's important to, again, it's been mentioned that somehow this was a police commission mistake. There's things within this, like the collective bargaining agreement, that, in the past, for example, it amounts to the amount of stat time that each member gets. They get 144 hours of stat time. Typically in the past, officers, it was a kind of 50-50 split where some would take that in days in lieu, some would take cash. We're seeing a trend that more and more officers are actually taking it as a cash payment. We're not sure why. Doesn't make much sense because you pay more tax when you do that, but there just seems to be a trend that they're doing that. So in the past, we weren't seeing that, we didn't budget for that, and now all of a sudden we're caught out where there seems to be this trend where they're taking this cash. So we have to adjust that, we recognize that. And there's some things with the guarding costs we were caught out by, but we've recognized that, we've made those adjustments. Will it be enough for 2019? There's going to be a deficit, but we don't anticipate being anywhere near what it is here. And of course, we're going to push very hard to recoup some of that through revenues. And that's what we're looking at, things like we're doing, one of the officers, the community liaison officer, for example, is doing some study looking into, for example, red light cameras, that type of thing at intersections as a revenue source. So we've identified this. And you're talking about service levels, is it a sustainable service level? We're gonna look at that going forward. I think those are good questions you all have for the chief when he comes and does his annual report very soon here. But you compare to Black Falls. Well, Black Falls doesn't have anybody on from,
3 till 7.
Exactly. We have 24-hour policing. I thought it was interesting to note when we had the grade 6 students in here, how many of them said, I think 3 or 4, said one of the things they like about Comas is the safe community. I mean, people recognize it is safer here than it is in outlying communities. All you have to do is look at crime severity index for Red Deer, Wetaskiwin, Black Falls, so forth, right? So there's something, it is a service that we pay for, obviously, but it's a service. I mean, I've sold a house to somebody, they came here because of our police service. So, we have to make that distinction that we have a terrific force. But make no mistake, the police commission, again, we were taken aback by this as well, just as you all were. Just in terms of process, I think my thoughts were a little bit that we knew 2 meetings ago about this. It would have been nice if May had come to the police commission at our last meeting and said, what do you guys suggest we do? Obviously, they would have said, city needs to absorb all of it or whatever, that's not going to happen. But, it would have been nice to get a suggestion from the police commission as to how to address the problem. And again, prior to this, I saw the agenda, just in terms of process, it would have been nice if we could have gone back. We met last week as a police commission, that we could have gone in and said, hey, this is what we're suggesting we're going to do. What are your thoughts on that as well? So just in terms of process going forward, I think we could do that a little better. But again, I think we have to just, I don't think it serves anybody any good to assign blame. It's their fault or this fault, or, there was, as CEO Gowdy had alluded to, there were some oversights. We make mistakes, we all do in this room. It's extremely unpleasant when we do it with taxpayer money, but it's not the first time this has happened in my time on council, and I'm not talking about police commission, I'm talking about other things. Hopefully it won't happen again. We recognize the issue in terms of sustainability and going forward. Again, those are excellent questions that you had, Councillor Ross, Councillor Jacobson, for the chief himself. But the police commission, rest assured, is cognizant of our issues.
So I think we need to keep in mind that the police commission is the only body that's in a position to adjust these numbers moving forward. The only choice that we have is to quit signing checks, and I don't think that's a viable option. So I'm going to suggest that we make an allowance on a future agenda for a report from the commission as to the corrective measures that they are taking to address this issue, because it is a substantial one. And once again, not to assign blame, but that is the body that is in a position to address this item, however unpleasant it may be.
And that's fair. We can do that when the chief comes in, when they present the annual report, because the chair will be there as well. Or you can do it either way.
And what date is that?
Working day is June 3rd, but that subject's changed based on management decisions from administration.
May, so I mean, that's 6 weeks kind of thing. Is that a reasonable time frame to have that information available, Chief Covey? Or would you prefer I direct that question to Councillor Connick?
I would find that probably to be a reasonable time if you have meetings in between them. It sounds like you have had a couple of meetings where they've talked about this, so there may be some ideas floating around already, I would think.
Does that seem like a reasonable request from Council as a whole? Are we on board with that? Councillor Hoekstra?
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I guess I don't know if this is a fair request, but I wouldn't mind seeing some accounting of where this 240,000 went. Reason being is this whole stat pay, the general holiday pay, that's not actually based on practices or choices by the commission staff to take a cash payout or not. That's actually Alberta labor standards that came in January 1st of 2018. So whether you work a stat or not, if you're not working it, you get paid for it, that's how it works now. And a little organization like ours knew that before January 1st, 2018, so I'm a little bit confused how the commission would not know that. But I realize the union, that's not based on union decisions, it was Alberta labor standards. So it cost FCSS $15,000 in order to pay that out. Over and above, suddenly we had to find $15,000. I still can't figure out how you hit 240 based on that mistake. I realize there's a whole bunch of mistakes. An extra FTE and admin, again, is not a huge paying position. I'm not trying to find blame or anything, but I would rather that we didn't say this is due to someone's personal practices of taking a cash payout or not. That was Alberta labor standards, and maybe we have to be more honest where this $240,000 deficit came from.
Chief Covey?
So the labor standards have changed with respect to paying for stat time and overtime. This, in the collective agreement, it is a different mechanism where January 1st, they are given, members are given 144 hours, just automatically into a bank time. It's not because they've worked stat time, it's not quite the same. And so I would say it's not totally clear, even to myself at this point, whether or not there is the ability to say, no, you have to take that this time off, or no, we won't pay it out, or that according to the collective agreement is still, I would say, a gray area for me.
Excuse me, Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So I guess I just wanted to ask one question in regards to the CBA. It's only a term agreement, so when is the last year of that CBA?
2020.
Okay, so it's quite soon. So I mean, a lot of the points I wanted to make have already been made, but I definitely strongly echo what Councillor Hoekstra said, that, you know, I do want to see a little bit more openness, a little bit more accountability on this dollar value. I'm honestly a little bit disappointed that this was just included as there was a deficit of X amount of dollars, and it's like, well, and for what? So to find out what actually caused that, it's not quite like pulling teeth, but I'm disappointed that I have to ask the question as to, you know, how we arrived at that, because that's a huge dollar value. I'm sorry, but people in this community want to know what the heck happened, and we should be providing them details. And we shouldn't have to ask for those details verbally. Honestly, I really think that those should have been included in the memo, and I do want to see a breakdown. So I'm asking for a breakdown. I'm not going to get it right now, but for a future meeting. And I also strongly agree with having some sort of presentation done. I get it that the commission is a separate entity, and I totally respect that. However, they are dealing with taxpayer dollars that we collect, and so I think that we are, owed that relationship so that we can work together to make sure this isn't happening again going forward, because frankly, we have no indication that it really won't. We're thinking, well, maybe it won't be this, it won't be that, maybe, but fact of the matter is we're going to be seeing a deficit again. So, I just really want to strongly get behind both of those ideas, and just to be really clear on the record.
Thank you. So I think we can look forward to that report and look forward to seeing the corrective measures that are being that either are taking place or proposed from the commission at our June 3rd committee meeting. And I'm sure that our administration will make that expectation clear to the commission. Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'm being repetitious about saying this, but it's kind of disappointing that we don't see this until there's actually an audit. So I think accounting responsibility needs to be kind of taken by all. I think there was another member hired and sent to training in January. So that was incurred in 2019, and I remember taking out a patrol and putting into liaison. So 2 members is $200,000. And I guess I just look at some of the decisions there. By the time we get to May 3rd, that's going to be 4 months into 2019. So, like I say, I think we deserve to know where the deficit's going to be by the next meeting, because obviously you're assuming we're going to already have one. So, thank you.
Thank you. So, just to be fair, I think it's not entirely accurate to suggest that this came about only because of the audit, and perhaps you care to comment on that, Chief Gowdy?
I'm not aware of this coming up in the audit at all, actually. The only way that we become aware, and I guess to your point, is we see that the commission's salary and benefits line is over by $240,000. And so, so we will absolutely make this was our opportunity to present to you. We can absolutely make a request to them to both say, give us a little more detail on how that came to be, and what your plans are to not have it come to be this year. I know that when we look right now, we've started doing sort of somewhat in response to this, really targeted quarterly reporting to all of our managers to say, hey, here's where your salary and benefits are at, to give an opportunity to have that dialogue to say. And so when we look, the police, it's about 41,000 at the end of quarter 1 that they're over. So that's where I'm coming with my projection to say, well, I think we're going to be over here again. But there may be other factors. Maybe there's they paid out a bunch of holiday time at the front end of the year, and so I think it's we're just at the front end of that. So we haven't had an opportunity to ask them those questions and get your answers. But Justin, did this come up in the audit? Is that?
No, it didn't. At year end, we review everything. We go through that. I had communication with the police chief that how are we looking, how's it looking? And I had to give him a month kind of notice of, we have to do some year end adjustments basically. And I didn't want to throw out a figure until those adjustments were done. But end of January, we'll pretty much done those adjustments, and I let him know what the deficit was. Further to the financial reporting kind of question around here, in May we'll have our new package, our new quarterly reporting package coming to council. Mind you, it's the first time you're going to see it, so it's going to be as perfect as we can get it. But it is our approach to this quarterly reporting is reporting as line by line, pretty much per business unit. And then as finance, if something looks odd, we'll be asking the question to the manager, and we'll have that answer for you. So that will be coming to a May meeting. And I assume that we'll include Department 21 Police in that quarterly reporting for council as well.
Councillor Jacobson?
Sure. So just because I anticipate perhaps some heated communication coming my way in the future, I want to be clear. I do not think it is the Commission's fault that this happened. I just want to be clear that I think it is certainly the Commission's responsibility to take part in the solution moving forward for this. A couple other things. I have no reason to doubt Councillor Connick's comments. So if in fact they were only made aware 2 months ago, but this didn't get turned up because of the audit, I'd be curious to know what's going on accounting-wise. Like, where's the disconnect between what they're getting on a month-to-month basis and why this turned up only after the year end? So those are questions I'd still like to have answered. So yeah, I'm obviously all in support of having them come here to discuss that. But I would also like to add that yeah, I certainly respect the the autonomy of the Commission for sure. But and I do agree with Councillor Connick that it would have been much more ideal to discuss with them about this proposed transfer from their reserve, because I know that that's very sensitive subject for them. But by that same token, if this was discovered 2 meetings ago, which I guess was 2 months ago, I would have also liked, as a councillor, to have them come in, you know, sometimes say, hey guys, like, this is what happened, we don't know why, we're not laying blame, but we're dealing with it, we're on top of it, we'll get back to you as soon as we got something going on. So, you know, that to me is a bit of a two-way street too, so I guess I'd like to have that on the record.
So Manager Dresser, I just want to clarify something. You suggested that this overage was known to you 1st of February after the year-end adjustments. So why is it that council is only finding out about this at the end of April then? I just want to know what the logistics are, what the communication is here, because that on the surface that seems like a significant amount of time in between finding out that there's an issue to us, to letting us know. So perhaps we just account for that time period in there.
So I would say there's a few factors. One, we wanted to be able to present it in terms of the overall city's picture, so to know what the year end actually looks like for the city. I think we would be having a very different discussion if the city's surplus hadn't been in a position to be able to absorb this overage. And so we wanted to see, are we in a position where we're actually a net deficit, or are we in a net surplus? There was also there was some concern about coming forward and saying, oh hey, the police are over budget, that, you know, we, as an independent arm, we really want to give them as much autonomy as we possibly can, and they did have a couple of meetings where they were able to discuss about that sort of thing. That's why I say I think they probably have a bit of a plan of how to mitigate this going forward. And I look forward to letting them to the June 3rd meeting. But we really, I guess, we held off because we were bringing it with the overall operating surplus or deficit once we have those numbers. And that maybe we should have brought it earlier.
I mean, that's a reasonable enough answer. That's just being honest. I appreciate that. But given this is a fairly substantial amount of money, I think that having that information 2 months ago, I would have just assumed been having the report from the commission 2 months prior to the annual meeting on June 3rd, as opposed to later. I mean, that would, the sooner we get on top of this, the better. So in future, sooner communication would be appreciated. Anyone else? Councillor Goldson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I just would like to echo your statements there too, and that's one of my concern. Manager Dresser, the new system, now is that going to improve this, I assume, where we're going to have this on a regular basis for all departments, as you said, including the police department, even though it's a separate entity?
Correct, yeah. We just finalized the package last month. The package will have an overall kind of city, kind of top-down looking, saying this is what we expected for the first quarter in terms of revenues and expenses, and this is what we're seeing. And behind the overall city will be per department. So we will work on the timing of expenses. That will throw out the numbers a little bit. If we're expecting a payment in the first quarter and it doesn't hit till second quarter, we'll understand that. So we'll get down to a detail that hopefully you'll feel comfortable at March 31st. You'll have a good snapshot of what ran through the city.
Yeah, and that's going to be quarterly throughout the year that you're going to present those numbers to us?
Correct, yeah. So March 31st will be your first quarter. We allow upwards of a 6-week period after that to finalise everything. That will finalise our invoicing, finalise any expenses that do come in. There is a delay once managers sign off on the invoices, get them through the system, get them posted to our new financial reporting system. So we do like a 6-week period, even though it's a fairly substantial time once the quarter ends, but we do need that in the financial realm to make the numbers as true as possible.
So this won't solve this completely, but would certainly improve the time frame when that kind of information would come to council then?
Correct.
Okay.
Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So although some of these weren't recognized till later, had these deficits been, say, reviewed quarterly even, say by hypothetically June of 2018, if you would have had a significant deficit, you may have made different operational decisions within the police commission and the chief that it may have not been as much. So in an accounting practice, should these not be, through the departments, be reviewed quarterly so there's more awareness of deficits earlier so you can stop the bleeding?
Chief Cody or Manager DeBresser, who wants to take that one?
I'll take that one.
Okay.
There's definitely, our approach to this new quarterly reporting is, this looks odd, what's wrong? And we'll ask the manager, from the finance perspective, we're an outsider, I don't know what's going on day in, day out of, public works or the utility department, but we'll be asking those questions to report back to you. This expense looks over and above, what's going on there? We'll be asking those questions and have a detailed report on the variances. In terms of underages and overages, definitely we'll be able to identify deficits quicker. Definitely report back to any unforeseen budget lines that are over. We'll have answers for you why they're over. Generally, the department overall, the policy does state that budget lines can vary. But the overall department budget shouldn't be over. So those little variances that we'll definitely be picking up on.
So we've got some pretty clear direction how we're going to proceed with this item. Councillor Cotter, did you want to add something?
Yes, I would, thank you. Just going through my police commission minutes here for the December 3rd meeting, we have a GL report. Yes, we are at that point, we are tracking over on wages for admin, and that's where this wasn't regular service, but it was admin. But we also have significant revenues we haven't realized yet. In fact, by the end of the year, we're still 400,000 below, at December 3rd, we're still 400,000 below our budget. So I don't know how to me, that's not a red flag. We're right on track. We're at 87%. We're not over yet. We're slightly over in some areas, slightly higher in others. At that point, there's no, yes, we're slightly over on our wages there, but we haven't realized a lot of our revenue yet either. So I think it's very difficult. It's any department. I can sit on FCSS budget. I've sat on that committee. I've sat on the library board. A lot of your revenues don't get realized till the end, after the end of the year. So again, when we're looking at these GL reports, trust me, we look at them every meeting. Chief is very keen at going over these. And there is no point here in December 3rd when I'm thinking, yeah, okay, we're slightly over on the wages for police admin, but we still haven't realized the revenues that we're hoping to realize. And at this point, we're still 400,000 below our budget in December 3rd. So again, we were as taken aback as anybody by what occurred here, and trust me, we'll be looking at it.
So for our allocation of operating surplus for 2018. There was some suggestions made to us for motions. Does anybody have any that they would like to entertain at this time? Councillor Hoekstra?
I would like to skip actually the first motion and send that one back to the commission, but I will move that council direct administration to transfer 94,289, unless we're not addressing that one yet. Sorry, I just realized, are we only dealing with the first motion with this police commission discussion? No?
Well, keep in mind this operating surplus is kind of a different issue. These expenses that have been realized already.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about correcting them moving forward. I'm not, it's not like we can't, it's not like we cannot just not pay them.
I do realize that, but I definitely heard Councillor Connick's desire that the commission, that we don't make this decision before the commission addresses this, or I don't know. I just heard that communication piece. I was a little bit concerned about that, but I don't know. I'm not ready to make a motion.
Councillor Connick?
So just for my own clarification, so the recommended motions, are there 3 motions or there's 3 parts to 1 motion? Can we just, or is that 3 separate motions? And then if there are 3 separate motions, why are we doing 3 separately? Because they're all part and parcel. If you don't do 1, then you can't do 2, and then you can't do 3, right? Or is it just something else?
Chief Gowdy?
They're all mathematically tied together. We had intended them as 3 separate motions, but you're right, to separate them is mathematically difficult. So it probably should be 1 motion. Or some direction of how, I would say that the underpinning, what's going to modify it is whether or not you want to take 142,963, 192,963, 0. That's the first decision you would want to make, is whether you want to make a withdrawal from the Lacombe Police Service Operating Reserve, and if so, how much. And then everything else kind of falls out from there.
So the way that it's presented here, that $143,000 basically retains a balance of around $50,000 in that account in the event of an emergency for the police department. Are we suggesting that we would like to alter that number? Or what? It's my understanding that number was left at the $50,000 mark. Should there be a requirement for a replacement vehicle in an emergency situation or something of that magnitude? Is that a fair assessment?
That's correct.
Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'll make the motion, recommend the motions as number 1, 2, 3 as stated. It's all mathematically tied together, so it's all 1 motion, is that not correct? So rather than reading it verbatim, as stated as recommended motions, 1, 2, and 3, all tied together for accounting mathematical reasons.
Okay, if no one has any objection to leaving the 142,963 number as it is, then you are moving that council direct administration has transferred that 142,963 from the Lacombe Police Operating Reserve to Department 21, which is the police, and the council direct administration to transfer $94,289 surplus from wages and benefits to the general operating reserve, and that council direct administration to transfer $367,581 to fund the 76th Street and Highway 12 intersection upgrades. And we're going to do that all in 1 motion. So we've got it read in the record. Councillor Connick.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So I'm fine with the motion. I just, before we call the question, I just had one other question, completely unrelated, it's within the body of this. Just the recommended allocation of surplus. We have an investment income, 108,000, wages and benefits, that's an in and out. A debt servicing of 241,792. Can you just elaborate on that a little bit more? That number, like where did that arrive at, or how does that, I'm just trying to figure out where that number is from.
The debt servicing of 241,792 is debt servicing that was budgeted for in the 2018 budget related to the West Area Servicing Project, but not actually serviced because we didn't move ahead with the project.
Perfect, thank you. You did say that, and thank you for that clarification. And then the 112,000, that was outlined in the previous, we haven't talked about yet, where that money's being divvied up, correct?
So the various departments.
Yeah.
So that's just various departmental savings on advertising or programming, that kind of thing across the whole municipality, averaging probably less than $5,000 a piece.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hoekstra?
I guess I want to still ask one more time, I'm being repetitious, but I don't disagree with the motion, I'm just still wanting to have good relations with the police commission, and will this be received okay, Councillor Connick, if we just go ahead with this? I know that great discussion has already happened, but you actually asked that the commission would have been part of this decision ahead of time.
So, yeah, in a perfect world, it would have, like I say, we were made aware of this 2 meetings ago. You know, it would have been maybe the last meeting if we were asked for some direction as to how you'd like to see this addressed. That would have been nice. It's neither here nor there. Is the 142 going to be a number that they're going to be happy with? Probably not. But I mean, you know, they probably like 0. But I think they're a smart group and they know that's not going to happen. I think this works. It still leaves 50,000. Again, had it come back to us, we would probably come back with a different number. Would that work for this group? I don't. At the end of the day, it's all the same kitty, so to speak. I think we're just very fortunate, A, that we had an operating surplus, 300-some thousand. B, that we had a surplus at police service we could draw from. And I think that the more important questions that have already been put forth here. What's the process going forward? Again, we've identified the issues, the problems, how we're going to fix it. We're going to try and fix it. Again, as I alluded to before, when I was talking about the GL report, to me there was nothing untoward, but it's just wham, when all the final revenue comes in, when all the final things come in, oh crap.
Anything further? So the amalgamated motion consisting of numbers 1, 2, and 3 on the board that I read out earlier. All those in favor? Opposed? Unanimous? Thank you. Back to page number 1 of the agenda, the spring budget amendments. Manager Professor?
Can I just jump in ahead of you? This always happens every year that we are wrapping up the 2018 budget and amending the 2019 budget, and it's always confusing, so I want to just, we are now talking 2019. The 2018 is over. Everything from now on in the meeting is 2019. So, continue on.
Thank you, CAO Gowdy. Yes, a good point. So before we do the tax rate bylaw calculation, well, past the tax rate bylaw, we like to review the 2019 budgets in terms of revenues and expenses, because things do change from the November 26th meeting to now. So the spring adjustments are based on the 2.8% tax increase. Changes in revenue, I'll go through them quickly. It was mainly an MSI operating grant. We assigned that money to different projects in the amount of $57,000. Number 1 there was to offset some of the census costs that's happening at the moment. That's in $20,000. Service level review, $30,000. That's part of the council's strategic plan. And with the target of that is to get completed by Q2 2020. And there was some minor item replacements, concrete store as well as fire suppression at the Mitchener Park concession. Municipal tax revenue increased over budget amounts by about $82,000, so that's due to new construction. So yeah, we do estimates on our new construction for 2018 that will form part of the 2019 tax roll. That came in at an extra $82,000. School requisitions, they're offset by the expenses, and I'll talk about them on the expense side. Other revenues around $46,000. We missed billing the electrical for the curling club. That accounts for about $28,000. Some minor accounts receivable revenue that we found there, as well as we had an anonymous donation from a resident for $15,000. Well, actually it was $30,000. We're going to expend 15 of that in 2019, and that's listed on the expense side of things as well. So flipping over to the expenses that actually equal the revenue, so there's no net increase to the tax revenue. Insurance premiums came in, they dropped again this year at $56,000, so we reduced the expenses over a variety of departments there. $96,000 in new expenses, and like I was saying, the $35,000 for the census cost. A $2,000 support for an admin position for the Special Forces pension plan. This was a request from the city to participate in a part-time casual position. Forgotten where it's housed, but a $2,000 support to help that position manage the Special Forces pension plan. Have you got?
It's for medicine.
Medicine hats, thank you. Some expenses that we have included is the Lacombe Performing Arts Foundation for $6,700. Increased repair costs for the Lacombe Memorial dividers at $10,000. $15,000 was missed for the sponsorship agreement. Just want to note that this is the last year of the sponsorship agreement, so any revenue going forward will be entirely to the cities. The $15,000 for the trail directional signs, posts, trail location signs, and some tree replacements. This was the offset to the $15,000 donation. Item number 5 there is changing some budget allocation. We found that the facility operator 3 staff is working more at the Gary Moe Autoplex as well as the Kingsman Aquatic Centre and Parks and Playground. 25% of those wages were allocated to the LMC. So what we found this year was the LMC being way under in wages and benefits, and the Sportsplex being over, netting out to zero. But it's going to show a little bit weird on the financials once we get into that cycle of quarterly reporting. So yeah, no actual cost there. It's just an allocation change that we wanted to get before you. So yeah, our recommendation today is that Council approve these spring budget adjustments as presented. And there's a breakdown of all the, in Appendix A, a breakdown of all the revenues. Oh, sorry, I skipped over the requisition for the school. I'll go back there, sorry for my mistake. This year, due to the provincial election, the requisition rates weren't released to municipalities. We kind of brainstormed on 3 different options on what we could do to prepare the tax rate bylaw for this. So that's coming up in the tax rate bylaw, but what we've done is estimated those expenses. The 2 other options was collect what we collected last year, as well as, what was the third option? And delaying the first reading of the bylaw. So I'll get to that in the tax rate bylaw, but we did estimate based on historic. Even though the education taxes have been going up and down, but we consistently kind of seen an increase over the last 3 or 4 years. So we estimated a 6% increase for residential and 8% increase for non-residential. So, as I mentioned, Appendix A lists all the ins and outs and just shows the balanced budget there. So I'll open up for your questions there, and we'll go from there.
So those adjustments are assuming that the CPI will be the same as it was last year at 2.8%?
That's correct.
And I don't follow the CPI. Is that a reasonable projection that it will be similar to last year? Cody?
So the CPI that we set it on is 2018 to 2019. We don't yet know what it's looking like for 2020? Have you been following it? There was a month where it was like 0 actually, which scared me a little bit, but we'll see where it ends up.
Yeah, so the 2.8% is set at July 1st in 2018. So we prepared the budget 2018 for 2019's budget based on that 2.8%. So going into 2019, preparing the budget for 2020, it will be July 1st of this year. We'll know what the Alberta CPI would be. Just a general feeling over the last few years that we've been doing this is generally gas prices have a big influence on the Alberta CPI, and generally there's a lag. Like with the gas prices that we're showing now, if they keep continuing, I could see that 2 to 2.5% could be reached again.
Thank you. Councillor Hoekstra?
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I'll move that council approves the spring budget amendments as presented.
Any discussions on that motion? Call the question then. All those in favor? Unanimous. So, under bylaws, financial services, bylaw 470, which is our 2019 tax rate, as for first reading, I think it was brought to our attention that, in fact, that particular item was not included on the agenda and circulated to council. However, let's keep in mind that this is a standard annual item, and this is only for first reading, just to bring it to the table. I think we should still consider it for first reading so that we can keep the timelines reasonable. There's still plenty of time for public input and certainly input from council to ask questions and have them answered appropriately. So let's keep that in mind. Manager Resser.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So before you is Bylaw 470, which is your annual property taxation bylaw. So this is a bylaw that we bring just after spring amendments every year, and it sets your tax rate for the bills going to go out at the end of May. The 2019 assessment roll is based on market values established July 1st of 2018 and the physical condition of the property on December 31st, 2018. The contracted property assessor completes the assessment roll, and then it's handed off to the province, and they do further testing to ensure our rolls are audible. They get pretty much a pass mark, and then we load it into our accounting system. Subject to approval of this bylaw, notices are sent out at the end of May with the direction to pay by July 2nd. In addition to levelling municipal property taxes, we also collect property taxes on behalf of Lacombe Foundation, Alberta School Requisition, and the Roman Catholic Division as well. So approximately just over $20 million is collected through this bylaw. I won't go into all the details on the assessment changes, but we did see a decrease in the assessment value for both residential and non-residential. Residential values dropped on average around 2.7%, and non-residential dropped around 1.2%. So in saying that, we expect the mill rate to increase, and it did show that our mill rate in 2018 was around that 7.47. and for residential, and it's now at 7.9%. So essentially what that does is your tax base, whether it goes up or down, your mill rate will go up and down to account for the same amount of revenue. So there was some questions about assessed values going up and down, and how does that affect my property taxes. Generally, looking at the city overall, individual cases will vary, but generally the city has a $1.8 billion tax base, and whether that goes up or down, the mill rate will correspond, go up or down, depending on that, if that makes sense. So on the municipal tax side, we'll collect $14.74 million, and that does account for 2.8% in new revenue based on that tax rate increase. As mentioned, the property tax, education property tax, we went with estimating based on this bylaw. If we do get direction in next week or so on the actual requisitions, we will amend the bylaw to include the actuals that we need to requisition. We looked at collecting the same amounts as in 2018, and we decided against that based on it could compound the problem in 2020 if rates do go up in 2019. We won't collect enough in 2019, and then it'll compound the increase in 2020. We looked at delaying the bylaw. We do have a pretty strict schedule on getting property tax bills out. We do have to print about 6,000 bills and get them stuffed and signed, and not signed, but stuffed in envelopes and run through and get them out in mailboxes. So we didn't really want to delay this bylaw. Option 3 was an estimation based on historic averages. We felt that was the best way to go. If we overestimated, it will go into a pot of money over here that will feed back into the 2020 rates. So it's not a bad thing overestimating this year. That it will get paid. It's called an over and under. So at year end, we do accounting for the requisitions to make sure the revenues do equal expenses, and whatever's over sits in the account, and that feeds into the 2020 tax rate bylaw. So just wanted to be clear there that it doesn't go into the municipal sources, but it sits in a pot of money that gets fed back into the mill rates for the education taxes in the following year. So the combined effect of these changes, both the education property taxes as well as the 2.8% tax increase, for a house that's typically assessed at $380,000, we'll see about $138 increase for the year. So just want to be clear on that. The non-residential, valued at $773,000, will see an annual increase of around $361. So our recommendation tonight is that you give first reading to Bylaw 470, and I'll open up for any questions.
Thanks, Manager Bresser. Just curious, with the annexation of College Heights and the stepped implementation of municipal taxes there, are they at full taxation yet, or
2022?
2022 they're on board? Okay, thank you.
That's 15 years from 2007, is that how?
Correct, yeah. It, in the first part of the bylaw, and third or fourth paragraph down there, saying, 2007, July 1st, 2007, the city, under Order 35, 2008, required properties to be taxed if they remained in the Lacombe County up to and including the year 2022. So that's our last annexation agreement.
So then the budgeted residential growth that was $116,000, a portion of that would be from that additional growth there? Is it because it's a stepped increase, is it not, or is it just a one-time, 1 year? It's
yeah, the annexation rates are based on the county's rates until such time as they flip over to the city. There's no.
So it's not a step?
No.
Okay, my misunderstanding. Thank you. Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'll make that motion that council give first reading to Bylaw 470.
Any additional comments? Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I actually just have a question. I was just wondering, like I know how the education levy is obviously, the authority for that is from the provincial government. I'm just wondering where the authority comes from. I'm not challenging it, but I'm just curious where the authority comes from for the Lacombe Foundation requisition. Is there a bylaw or a ministerial order, or what is it that actually grants that ability for the Lacombe Foundation to just let us know what it is they need and then we collect it on their behalf? I've just always wondered that.
I think it's in the Municipal Government Act, but we will certainly find it and then get that information out to council.
Councillor Hoekstra.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. It has to do with seniors housing in the province and the provision of, for lodging for seniors, so it's under that. We just talked about it today, but I don't know where it actually, which act it comes out of, but it is a provincial ability that the foundation can requisition monies.
So I think that's pretty safe to say that in fact it does fall under the Municipal Government Act. But which portion, which portion of it, they'll find out and get back to us.
I just would like
there.
an answer.
Sure.
It's not
That's-
tonight, but.
That's the only place taxation can come from. We don't have the ability to do that of our own accord. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct. We will find out and get back to you for sure.
We have a motion before us, presented by Councillor Gullickson. Not seeing any additional comments. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Thank you. And then I'll ask our CAO to take us through some council and legislative items here. The Resource Community of Canada Coalition from the Alberta Urban Municipalities Association.
Thank you. Just related to that last note, it is the Alberta Housing Act that contains the power to requisition on behalf of lodges. So my apologies for it here. The Alberta Urban Municipalities Association is leading an effort to obtain the support of member municipalities in forming a Resource Communities of Canada Coalition. This is in support of Alberta's energy industry, particularly their building into an education campaign in the upcoming FCM conference in Quebec City. And so they have asked members to pass resolutions of support. It's not really a very tangible thing, but certainly it is something that's important to Lacombe, as it's important to all Albertan communities. And so we wanted to bring this before council to see if there was a desire to pass a resolution of support.
Councillor Hoekstra.
Just a question under the purpose. It says it's to give a voice to municipal resource development interests across the country, I'm guessing, rather than the county, or did you already correct that? This is a federal thing, right?
It is across the country, yes. So I guess just following up on it, major activities include the education campaign, advocacy regarding Bill C-69, and establishment of the Resource Communities of Canada Coalition with the detailed terms of reference. There's no cost or, I guess, resource demand on the City of Lacombe to pass this resolution.
Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I would certainly speak in favor of, going ahead with this. There's certainly some good opportunity quite soon for, some advocacy, because the FCM, of course, is in Quebec, and well, I don't need to rehash, what that looks like. But I think there's some good opportunity for conversation there, and I'd like to say that Lacombe is, behind that officially by, a letter of support. That would make it official. So I would move that council support the Resource Communities of Canada Coalition by forwarding a letter of support to the president of the AUMA.
Additional input? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous, thank you. And Director Thompson, could you take us through the extended producer responsibility item, please?
Absolutely, thank you, Mayor Creasy. Like the item before council previously, AUMA is advocating to the province for the province to modernize its recycling regulatory framework across the province. They're arguing that the implementation of what's called as extended producer responsibility policies, and by updating their current provincial recycling programs, and by utilizing carbon tax revenue to support municipal waste reduction initiatives that also reduce greenhouse gas emissions, municipalities can reduce waste overall by shifting the cost of managing that waste from local taxpayers to producers and consumers of materials that can otherwise be could be recycled. And so the area that primarily what would impact the city of Lacombe would be in that EPR, that is extended producer responsibility policy. So EPR is it's a policy approach whereby the producers of wasteful materials are levied a charge, and that the funds collected through that levy. So I'll back up. The charge is levied on producers of those materials as they're producing them, and that money is used to fund a recycling, the operations to actually collect that material and recycle that material and bring it to a recycling market directly. Right now, that is borne almost entirely by the private industry, whereby every municipality has to go out to RFP, has to set its own recycling materials targets based on what it wants to recycle, and then it has to find a producer or someone to collect that material, and then depending on their system, sort that material and get it to market. And so what the extended producer responsibility policy does is allows a program to be taken off of municipalities individually, put it in the hands of a provincial framework whereby the municipalities would participate, and the funding for all of that collection and sorting of that recycling material would be funded through the purchase of just simply purchasing those products. It's built into the price of purchasing products. So products that have perhaps more wasteful materials might have a higher levy versus products that have more recyclable materials may have a lower levy. And so that allows it to function. So EPR is something that is being utilized by 8 provinces across the country, and for instance in BC, it services over 1.8 million households across BC, and so this is something that is I wouldn't say widespread, but certainly fairly well known in Canada, and AUMA is advocating that the province, among other things, strongly consider implementing EPR policies at the provincial level as well. And so administration is recommending that council participate in AUMA's advocacy efforts to modernize the province's recycling framework, and by sending a letter to Mr. Ronald Orr, MLA for Lacombe.
So I don't see a bunch of other lights on it. Well, I certainly support the reduction of waste, or of using wasteful materials or whatnot. I'm not really sure that I follow the executive summary here when it says can help municipalities reduce waste by shifting the cost of managing waste from local taxpayers to producers and consumers of those wasteful materials. Where that cost is implemented, there's only one consumer that can pay the cost, whether it's in the price of the item or the actual waste itself. So it's a small item, but we're robbing Peter to pay Paul here.
It's a fair comment. I think it's a case of aligning the incentives. So the products that are more wasteful may be more expensive against competing products that are using materials that are less wasteful. And if there's a system in place at the provincial level that charges a levy based on how recyclable a material is, that consumers will shift their decisions to less wasteful products or less wasteful packaging, for instance, in order to in order to bring down the overall waste across the province in general.
Councillor Jacobson.
Sir, maybe this question is directed for the CAO, who could probably comment on this more intelligently than myself, but as I understand it, these levies that are charged in other provinces and the price points charged by those products, we pay the same prices in Alberta. So essentially, the producers of these products, they're downloading that onto the consumer in other provinces, and they're getting a free dip off us here. Is that essentially correct?
Yeah, that was actually going to be my comment, that I think in the long term, yes, it curbs wasteful packaging. In the short term, I think the frustration is that Albertans are paying twice for managing these materials. Is that when it comes to nationally distributed products, they are priced nationally, and you're paying the same for Tide Pods here as you do in BC, except in BC, they're turning around and paying for everyone for the recycling program in BC, but here we have to levy our citizens again, even though they've already paid for that. And it's not all products, it's only products that are priced nationally, but that, for me at least, was the most compelling side of this, was to say, well, consumers in other provinces are actually paying less in a way for their products.
Councillor Hoekstra?
Mayor Creasy, are you ready for the motion, or are you did you want to say something? No? Okay. I'll move that council direct administration to participate in AUMA's advocacy efforts to modernize the province's recycling regulatory framework by sending the letter to Mr. Ron Orr, MLA for Lacombe, Pinoca.
And everybody's had an opportunity to read that letter. Any additional input? All those in favor? Unanimous, thank you. And Director Piche, under item number 7, bylaws and corporate services, we've got bylaw 468, which is our community standards bylaw, ready for a possible second reading.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Yes, before council tonight is second reading of the new community standards bylaw. This bylaw has received first reading back in March. Since then, a survey has been created and then distributed for residents and businesses to be able to provide feedback to council regarding this bylaw. Today, at this point, we're looking at over 290 people who have provided feedback on the survey, and the survey is open until April 30th. A compilation of the comments and the results will be provided to council on May the 6th at the committee meeting, and yet still copies will be provided at the trade show coming up this weekend for people if they want to do the survey online or in paper. So tonight, if council would like to provide any feedback, administration would recommend that they do second reading of the bylaw at this point. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you. Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So I guess what I would first like to comment on is that we're already at second reading, but there's no changes made. So unless we go ahead and make some changes, we're going to just be, approving the exact same motion the exact same bylaw that came before us. We've put out for all this engagement, but of course it's just a bit too soon because we haven't heard back from that. As you said, the survey hasn't closed yet. I mean, I've had a few conversations about this, but generally speaking, I've been directing people to do the survey, so I haven't really gotten too carried away with this. So I guess my question is why are we doing this already? I'd like to put forward that council consider deferring this actually to a later date? Is there a need that we proceed with second reading tonight? Because I feel like it's premature. What I would really like to do is get that feedback, try to incorporate that into the next reading, and then put it one last time out for the public. Okay, we're not going to have an official survey, but then people can see sort of a finished product and go, no, you've totally missed the mark on that, or yeah, you got it, thank you for listening, kind of whatever they decide to give us back for feedback. But if anybody cares, I suspect they do, otherwise we wouldn't have the response rate that we have to that survey. But anyway, that's what I would like to put to council, is if they would consider deferring this to a later date.
Chief Cody?
So it's funny, we had the same discussion beforehand. So the issue is that in March, when we presented the timelines, this was when we said we would bring it. We didn't really know how the public consultation would play out, and with Conference Council coming up, I said the same thing, that really, why would you want to give second reading when you don't even have the public consultation, and there's been great response on it. So we were following through on what we had said in March, but it certainly doesn't bother us at all if this gets tabled until later.
Thank you. Councillor Connick?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I would agree with Councillor Hibbs. I think it's a little premature at this point. Because to me, we're just setting ourselves up for a messy third reading where we're going to try and incorporate all these other changes that have come about. I agree. I think we should wait, have a proper discussion, and then we can have a document that comes back for third reading that's got all the changes, everything's highlighted in red. It's pretty clear what we're trying to do, what we're trying to accomplish. I'm totally in agreement.
Councillor Hoekstra?
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I also agree. I just would like to point out, though, I trust that citizens are reading these documents. So the Responsible Animal Ownership Bylaw was created and adopted on March 11th, 2019, wasn't it? It says 2018 in the document. Sorry.
Sorry.
Director Piche, just for some confirmation on the bylaw, the way it reads now. When we originally discussed for the use of backpack leaf type blowers and whatnot, is the only reference in them here so they cannot be used during nighttime hours as per definition in there?
That is correct. Yeah, it is during the nighttime hours.
It'll be interesting to see how that one's perceived by the public, because I don't know that 7 a.m. necessarily accomplishes what we want in that particular item, but
with a very precursory review of the results, there has been a lot of discussion on the hours of the nighttime hours and such. It's gone in various directions. Like I said, it's very precursory. But there has been a considerable amount of comments on those hours, so yeah.
Councillor Hoekstra?
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I was asked by the chamber whether Monica couldn't remember who approached her to be involved in getting businesses to respond to the survey. Did you? I didn't talk to the chamber. Did someone on staff? No?
I did not. So.
Okay, I just encouraged her to direct all chamber members to do the survey. Okay.
They've been promoting it on social media.
Okay.
Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I echo everybody's concerns, but I do have one question. Is the process of the unsightly properties with the property that was enforced upon last year, is that easier now because in the past, or to enforce, or I guess some of the responses you see is areas of unsightly properties and garbage, like is there more access for disposable garbage cans, and the process of the unsightly properties, can that be faster?
Chief Cody?
So the unsightly properties one is tough. I would say it's more about an enforcement philosophy, and at the front end, you can be quite proactive with your municipal fines, like that's within the municipality's control. When it comes to an actual cleanup order where you are physically entering someone's property, our own bylaws don't really matter anymore for that. It's a provincial standard that you have to meet, and whatever bylaw we pass does not supersede that provincial standard. So I would say, yes, this gives us a better definition of what an unsightly property is so that our officers can go and approach that property and try to get compliance. In the extreme cases where there is no desire for compliance by the occupant and that we really are going to have to go in and physically perform the work, it is no change.
Thank you. Just these amount of fines to me doesn't create a strong enough deterrent. That's my only comment of all of it, and I don't see a need to go into it more because we're just gonna, I think it's important to, we have a coffee with the council for purpose and what, 290 responses. I think that's awesome, but I agree with everybody else. It's just that one area of, you want a long-term solution. It's kind of like change or get out, so to speak.
So it was, I'm sorry, go ahead, Chief Cuddy.
Well, I would recommend, from what I'm hearing, that maybe you would want, someone would want to entertain the idea of making a tabling motion until such time as the public consultation results are available.
Yeah, I would think that that's appropriate if we choose to that. Just keep in mind, there's no discussion allowed if it's tabled. We could also just accept as information, would accomplish the same thing. So whichever any council member is prepared to do, will move us forward. Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I would suggest that it's not tabling, actually be postponing that we'd want to do, but I personally would rather postpone it and postpone it using essentially the language that CAO Gowdy said there, that it would be postponing it so that it would be post public engagement, I guess, if that's what, or public consultations, so that we can incorporate that in. So not a specific date, but I'm sure it's going to take a little while to crunch 320 plus responses.
So in fact, it is to table then, because postpone must include a date to which time it's supposed to be reconsidered. And if that is our, if that is your wish, then we need a date associated with it. The table just says temporarily set aside an issue and bring it forward or bring it back without debate. To postpone is to state the time the motion or agenda item will be resumed, usually the next regular meeting, and must be passed by a majority of members present. It shall appear on the agenda for the meeting date specified as an item of unfinished business. So, if you just after a simple majority, tabling is
I think you have to respect
easier,
your
right?
administration's going to have to go through 300 plus. Like a time frame, it should be.
Still planning on bringing that forward on the committee meeting.
Just trying to respect the amount of feedback for yourself, that's all.
So, Councillor Hibbs, did you prefer to have a...
Well, if that's the case, then I would postpone it to that specific date, that first meeting, I guess, in May, not the committee, but the first regular meeting, if Edmund thinks that that's doable. May 13th then.
Reasonable time frame?
We can. We had planned to have this at the committee meeting though, right?
The actual compilation of the summary of all the results of the public consultation will be at the committee meeting.
And that's prior to the 13th, is it not?
Yes, that's on the 6th of May.
So my only concern, if we postpone it to the 13th, we may have a very light agenda on the 6th, which is fine, which is totally fine, but just that's
Sorry, I must not be understanding. Why does that affect what we're doing? We can still have it brought to us at the committee meeting, but then not, why?
Just by the very definition that it was ready
I
to...
think the suggestion was that we deal strictly with public consultation on the Friday meeting and nothing else.
That's
And
correct.
The
Just
following
the-
regular meeting deal with the second or third readings.
But that is what that's what I'm asking to do, but I'm confused now.
Yeah, she's
Pretty tough to deal with specific items of the bylaw and not deal with the bylaw itself, and that's not what, that's why I suggested that we perhaps consider the tabling. And then it's at administration's discretion and would enable us to in fact discuss it at the committee meeting.
When that's ready.
or a postponement to that committee meeting is fine also. Postponing it past the committee meeting, then we won't be able to bring it to the committee meeting, is the only consideration we have.
But, okay, I'm sorry, I'm just obviously really slow. So what you were planning on bringing at the committee meeting was just the results of the survey. That is it. Not what second reading looks like, not what it looks like incorporated into a bylaw, just the results of the survey.
That's correct.
And then at the meeting, the following meeting, we would actually be doing second reading of the bylaw. So that's why I'm confused why those aren't separate.
So although Director Pichet is saying we're presenting only the results, I would be very surprised to find that there was no debate related to said results. If it's literally just a presentation of the results and there's no debate, then I suppose that works. It's not typically how I've seen committee meetings go for these kind of reviews. Is typically we would present the public consultation results and then there would be some discussion related to those results.
I guess I'm just struggling with how the results are going to help us if we can't put it into context as how it relates to the bylaw. That's all. That's all I was getting at. So basically, either you might want to consider either a date adjustment or just tabling the motion, and then that takes care of it in one fell swoop, whichever you'd like to consider, if any. Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy, but if we're just discussing information to bring it forward back for the 15th for the second reading, what's wrong with the intentions of discussing the final draft to be presented on the 13th? I kind of...
So if I could, it's clearly, in my mind at least, the mover's intent that there be a discussion of the public consultation, or a presentation of the public consultation results at the first meeting of the committee, and the second reading would occur at the first real meeting. Is that accurate? So we have that, whether it's a postponement or a tabling, it's fine for us. We can proceed as such, if that's council's direction. That we would bring public consultation on the 3rd, and on the 13th, we will bring the full second reading of the bylaw. 6th is committee. Sorry, what did I say? 3rd. I'm sorry, the 6th. To just confuse things there. So right here.
So is it open for discussion on this? Is there? No. I would say some time on the 13th.
So
That is my motion.
is what? If you just reread it for us, please.
To postpone. If council does not agree with my motion, then they are free to vote against it and try again.
Okay. Postpone to what date?
The very first regular meeting, so that I don't propose any changes to bringing the information from the survey at the committee meeting, but I would postpone second reading of the bylaw to that first regular meeting in May, whatever the date is, at the 13th, is that what it is? Yes.
Which is fine, so you're okay with not discussing it at the bylaw, at the committee meeting then?
I'm fine with that because a committee meeting is for receiving information and not for debate, and we know that whether we were talking about looking at a bylaw or whether we're looking at survey results, it doesn't matter.
Very good. All those in favor? Those opposed? That's carried. Thank you. So it's 7:36. We want to take a short break and give the meeting the time to ask questions if they want, or do they want to? Does the media have any questions they would like to ask of any administration or council? They do. Very good. We will reconvene at 7:50.
No more style. That's actually
It's pretty good.